The Marlins heading into Philadelphia. They are the 5 seed and they are facing the Phillies in a 3-game wildcard series. The Marlins back in a full regular season 162 wildcard for the first time since 2003. What happened that year? They went on to win it. How do the Marlins win this year's World Series? We start with the Phillies, and this is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This is your daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. This is your team every day, and thanks to making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. This could be Locked On Postseason. Who knows? There is a YouTube channel, guys, of course. Hit subscribe there also. It is called Locked On Marlins. And guys, the Marlins have made it, and I'm delighted to welcome into the house on Monday, the 2nd of October, of course, the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett. How are we doing, brother?
I'm doing well, Pete. Bit of an issue after yesterday's celebrations, but yeah, this is the time to really celebrate, because this is, as we've said a lot, this is a rarity for us Marlins fans. So yeah, super up for this.
Super pumped, mate. 5 seed Marlins, they would have made it in a normal wildcard race anyway. So, they didn't have to go back to New York. Kim giving it the Djokovic. See you later. Tons to get into, mate. But listen, this series is going to be an absolute stunner. And the really interesting part is the Marlins are what I would describe in the primetime slot. Not only have they made it, but they aren't buried in the early slot. They are in the primetime slot against the Phils. This series, I think, could have everything. This episode is sponsored by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. That app is going to be extremely valuable over the next couple of weeks for baseball fans. No doubt about it. We'll talk about those guys later on. Sean, I know I've done a couple of emergency pods covering basically all the action over the weekend, etc. Try, if you can, to give me your reaction on the Marlins, not just clinching, but also clinching as a 5 seed and heading to Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, there was a scenario where obviously they could be playing today, and it really could have been a drawn-out process. But they went ahead and got the business done, got it done early, and got it done so well that they did end up in the wildcard 2 spot. And for me, that's kind of big for me, because not just the differences in travel or anything like that, or who we have to play. It's that I know what would have happened if they'd got the wildcard 3 spot. It would have been a case of, here's this team with a negative run differential, the lowest run scored in the National League. They crept in because they were lucky and because of the new rules. And as it is, no, they got there well on their merits. Have they been lucky? Sure. But they've got into the playoffs, and they would have got into the playoffs with last year's rules as well. So this isn't just a 2023 asterisk season, because we've heard enough and had enough of that about the 2020 season, and that's probably more fair. But this is, they got in, got the job done, and we saw with the Cubs, like, they absolutely just crumbled at the end. The Marlins, with all their injuries, with all the issues they've had, could have absolutely just fallen away at the end and not made it. But they delivered when they needed to.
Absolutely. How do you feel about an 84-win team making it into the wild card?
I mean, it's a little questionable, isn't it? I mean, we see sometimes in the NFL teams getting in with a losing record almost. So I think the baseball have done the right thing in opening up the playoffs. I think this year is just. I think normally an 85, 6, 7 is going to be what you need to get there. I think just some of the teams just fell away. Some of the teams were really bad, like 100 lost seasons. Like some of the teams were really, really bad. So I think it is a case of, normally I think it would take more to get into the playoffs. But 84, I mean, it's only 2 games over 500. And thankfully that's all it required, because after the All-Star break this year, the Marlins really did nearly mess it up in the end.
Yeah, they did. They gave us a scare, no doubt. I do think it's interesting, like the number to get in. I think it certainly helps this year that clearly at least three highly projectable teams, way underperformed. And the teams I'm talking about are the New York Mets, San Diego Padres, and the St. Louis Cardinals. All three of them really, really underperformed and just really didn't show up this year. And so that created the opportunity for the Marlins and the Diamondbacks and the Cubs. Like the Cubs, I don't think going into this year were, overly optimistic about making it, particularly, the Cardinals in that division, the Brewers. I don't think they were. And so, those three teams, bit of a surprise package. The Reds equally emerged as well. So, a lot of teams that weren't expected to do well ended up, benefiting from the poor performance of the other teams around it. And for me, it's just fun. It's fun, and it's actually really engaging. And we've seen baseball this year, even though some of these big name teams haven't done well. What we've seen, though, Sean, is like attendances, general interest in baseball, way up. Like the attendances were, I think I saw it earlier on, maybe like 10% up, let's say. Let's just round it up to 10. So, rule changes are being brought in, different teams in the hunt. Like, baseball, it feels like is moving in the right direction just more generally. And I think, this postseason, I think, should be a lot of fun. I quite like this format. There's definitely a few kinks in it, I must say. Like I do feel like the lack of the fact that they operate with a bracket rather than a reseed like the NFL. Like if the 6th seed is still in it, the 6th seed is who the Braves should face, in my opinion. The Braves' advantage of you're the 1 seed. If the 6th seed makes it through the wild card, that's who the Braves should be facing, in my opinion. Just that should be the advantage and the incentive to keep going in some ways. So, but what's just your general take here on baseball, the rule changes? It feels like things are in a real positive direction, which is great for us and great for the game.
Yeah, I mean the results have been exactly what MLB would have wanted when they made the decision to open up an extra wildcard spot. It will be interesting to me to see what happens in the playoffs, because as you just said, some of the higher profile, bigger market teams aren't in it. So there might be an issue, especially if the Marlins carry on through Philadelphia, through the Braves. Two really big market teams. Like the numbers on the TV screens could look lower. And that'd be a shame. It's just the truth, isn't it? That'd be a shame. And I think a bigger story will be made of that, other than just that there were smaller market teams in the playoffs. There'll be some attack of what not with the rules changes or whatever. But yeah, for me, the results have been there. Like watching the games, the viewership of the game is so much better now. You're not locked into 3.5, 4, 5 hours every night. Sometimes you can get in, get out. Nice 2.5 hour game, especially for us over here in the UK. I mean,
no doubt,
it's perfect. Like a 2 a.m. finish is so much better than a 4 a.m. finish. That's for sure.
It's perfect for everyone, mate. I mean, it's just you can't have 4 hours a day for 6 months. It's too much. It's too much, to be honest. So the 2.5, like just kind of squeezing all the action in. Nothing's lost. There's no outs have been lost. We've just trimmed the fat. It's perfect. What did you make about the Marlins and Phillies being put into what I would describe as the primetime slot? Seems like, they're in the same slot every day. The last game out, 1 a.m. UK time, so not optimal for us, but for the US fans, I think that is primetime. What would you make on that? What do you make on that? Because when I did see the Marlins are obviously going to make the postseason, I was interested to see, are they going to be the first out? Clearly, I knew the Rays were also going to be in this wild card. And I did feel like it'd be kind of like either the Marlins or the Rays, depending on who they matched up. I would have been interested if the Marlins were facing the Brewers, actually, to see what slot they would have been in. But yeah, for me, I look at this draw, I look at this wild cards, extravaganza we're going to face into. I truly believe, bias aside, I feel like the Marlins Phillies is the most juicy matchup out there. What about you?
There's a hell of a lot of bias in that statement, isn't there? I'm surprised, genuinely surprised that that's the case, that they've put them on last. It might be just, is that the best time for them? Obviously, it is prime time, literally, but it's weird, isn't it? Because you're going to have fans of some of these teams that aren't going to be able to watch the game because they're fitting in so many that the work's going to get in the way. So for me, yeah, it was a bit of a surprise. I mean, I don't know whether, surely thought goes into this. It's not just a random draw and they just pick it and choose it. But they obviously, look, these people in baseball know what they're doing. They're there to earn money. So they're going to have picked it in the way that they think is going to be the best situation. And yeah, I mean, the Marlins Phillies series is going to be entertaining. You've got division rivals going against each other. And obviously the Phillies and the Marlins have had, there's been not any contention in our history, but certainly the Marlins and the Phillies always is an entertaining product.
It is.
So be really interesting to see how it goes.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to talk about, let's really get into that series shortly, because you're right, it is going to be an entertaining product just by the makeup of these clubs. I feel like they match up really well and pair really well, and so it should be fun. I think that's kind of the thought behind this. Equally, like the Philadelphia, I mean, they're in the World Series last year. It's a big market. There's going to be a lot of interest from them too. So before we do that, it's time to let you know about our good friends over at Gametime. We need the graphics up as well. And I think it is the teal graphics too. So we get them pumped. Should always have these ready, but I've got no producer with me on this show. It's produced, hosted, managed by me. Nevertheless, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. And you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And with killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Yes, sir. And they have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code, and that is LOCKEDONMLB, all in caps, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, you are joining me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett, on Monday, the 2nd of October. We are sitting here on an off day. A lot happening, though, in Philadelphia. Pressers, on-field action, tons happening, mate. But fundamentally, the Marlins, they have a 3-game series in front of them against the Philadelphia Phillies. And, Sean, I think one of the main talking points will be and will continue to be, and also was leading up to this, is what's the rotation going to look like for the Marlins? I think we knew what the Phillies were going to throw out there, and they have gone as expected. But from a Marlins perspective, it was like, how are they going to piece together this rotation of 3-game series? We got the announcement yesterday. Jesus Luzardo gets the ball in game 1. Braxton Garrett gets the ball in game 2. Game 3 starter, not yet announced, but we'll get to that when we need to. What are your thoughts on that lineup, I would say, from a rotation perspective?
I mean, that's kind of what we expected, I think. One of the advantages of not having to have the pressure of playing today, or at least needing those guys to pitch over the last couple of days on short rest or whatever, is that they're ready. So I think Luzardo, Garrett, that was the obvious choice. And then it's a pick your poison game 3, isn't it? Likely to be Eddie, of course. But and he's pitched a lot better recently. Like it's basically flip a coin which Eddie you're going to get. He could be elite and really lock down a role for himself as far as like winning a series for the Marlins. But hopefully it doesn't go to game 3 and we can just lock it down in the first 2. But yeah, Luzardo, Garrett, I mean, these might not have been the names that we were thinking in our heads of trusting in a playoff series at the beginning of the season, but they've earned this. This isn't they're starting these games by proxy. Obviously, Sandy was there. Sandy would be pitching, but they have got the numbers. They've had the year to back up being a number 1, 2 starters in the playoffs.
Yeah,
take the names away and just put the stats up. That's what most teams are throwing out there. And of course, the one thing to remember is everyone's stats are back down to 0. That first start, first game, that first at bat, they'll show you the season numbers, but their numbers technically will be all 0s.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what you've done this year. I mean, Stallings can get a home run winning hit, and all will be forgiven. I don't care what you did in the season. This is a completely different beast. where we've seen MVP players hitting below the Mendoza line.
Yeah.
But yeah, as going into it, these guys have delivered, and I'm not going into the playoffs thinking, oh, we're not at 100% and we're going to struggle. I think the Marlins have got everything they need to go and make a surprising run.
No doubt. I look at this Phillies matchup, and when I saw those, because I was debating in my head a few days ago on the pod, just when I was rolling solo, and clearly we didn't know how game 161/162 was actually going to play out. Like, was Braxton Garrett actually going to have to pitch or not? And that kind of fed into the thinking. If he did have to go in some sort of way, I was wondering maybe they'd flip it then and follow the rest pattern, obviously, and go Luzardo game 1, which I think we all expected. But then it was like, okay, you're going to go Eddie Cabrera, piggybacking with Guido maybe. Like, I'm intrigued to see how they can actually piece that third star together. But I think the guys you called out makes a ton of sense. Like, it was no-brainer. They're the best 2 starters. So it's like, bang, bang. They're the starters. Luzardo gets the ball. Makes sense. Obviously, Brax will be on like super long rest, I guess, now, which is, going to be good for him. He's, they're effectively kind of swapping order, I guess, there, really. But as well, what I was thinking about, okay, you got 2 lefties going back to back, and then you've got a ton of lefties in the pen. Like, the Marlins are going ultra lefty heavy here. And, when I think of the Phils, clearly you've got Kyle Schwarber, top of the order, big lefty guy. I'm thinking, okay, that probably matches up well platoon-wise. Who's the other guy you want to avoid? Bryce Harper, another lefty guy. I'm thinking, actually, I do wonder if this, ultra lefty approach will actually maybe help the Marlins in this series. Then I saw some numbers knocking around that actually the Phillies against lefty starters have been really good this year. However, against Brax and Luzardo, I think we're 0-4. So, that does give me confidence that, the lefties going may just slightly neutralize some of the main weapons here for the Phils. I don't know. I mean, they've got tons of weapons. The offense is deep. It's most guys are hitting, WRC plus above 100, I think, in the lineup. Like, it's such a deep and versatile lineup. And there's a couple of guys in there that look like Marlins, to be honest with you, contact hitters that just kind of frustrate you. But, they've got the power sprinkled in there. In some ways, I feel like these offenses are kind of built in a similar way. But what's your thoughts on that? Just having the 2 lefties going back to back, not really changing it up. And obviously, Schwarber, Bryce Harper, some big power threats, both lefties. Bryce is a former MVP. And Schwarber's, he hits more home runs than he does singles. So, these guys, their power threats don't matter who's throwing. But I don't know, could this help the Marlins here?
I mean, it's going to be key, isn't it? Because, I mean, the home run is in the playoffs is such a weapon, isn't it? And especially with the way that the Marlins are built, they can't get into a slugging match, really. No. Or at least, historically that has always been the case. I think when you talk about lefty numbers, the one thing you've got to factor in is there are some pretty bad lefties out there. And normally, historically, like the lefty, he throws with a little bit less gas than the righty, or at least you can get away with it more. With Luzardo, obviously, that's not an issue. He's throwing upper 90s. Yeah. So I think, it is a case of like lefty, righty does matter. And it will help into the game having all those lefty options. You can sort of pick your poison almost, couldn't you? But I think it is a case of if that works for the Marlins, then that would be great, because it is a case of we know we're lefty heavy. There's only a couple of guys that you trust. There's only a couple of guys at all in the bullpen that are righties. But especially in leverage, and we'll be talking super leverage, won't we? When you're bringing in the relievers against a lefty in the 6th, 7th, 8th inning of a playoff game that's close, like this is it, isn't it? This is what we've worked for all season, and every single decision will be micro-analyzed. Every single game will be micromanaged. So having that many lefties, quality lefties as well, is going to be absolutely key.
Death by lefties, isn't it, for the Marlins? Like, it's really intriguing that they've just got 2 lefty starters going, plus all the leverage pen is effectively left-handed also. I know Robertson has worked his way back into leverage situations, and to your point, like leverage situations effectively start like in the first inning. Like there is every inning is a leverage inning now. And so it's managed accordingly. Going to be really interested to see how Skip manages things too. Like, this is going to be the first time he's been in this environment as a manager. But I feel like he's been managing games already like postseason games. So I feel like Skip's already kind of dusted it off a touch and he knows what to do. And frankly, the way that the starting pitching is for the Marlins, like there's no decisions to make. Luzardo gets the ball, Braxy gets the ball, and then we'll see what happens in game 3. But I think we all know that game 3 is effectively going to be, maybe they go opener, with Cabrera that follows, I don't know. Or maybe they just get Cabrera out there. But I can truly see a situation where you've got Eddie Cabrera out there until he looks like he wobbles in the slightest. And then honestly, I can see Johnny Cueto coming after Eddie Cabrera. The reason being, and we'll segue into some of the hitters shortly, but the reason being with Cueto, the one thing he doesn't do is walk anyone. That's the one thing with Cueto, and I do feel like, you could trust him a time through the lineup maybe. He may give up a solo shot, but he doesn't walk anyone. And I think that's really valuable here. And it's kind of like the antidote to Eddie. It's almost like you pack them two together. I do wonder what you'd get. But it's going to be tough for Skip. Like clearly, there's been times, Sean, where it's clear the faith in Eddie has been wavering a touch. There's been signs of improvement, but I think we'll all, like, if the game 3 starter is Eddie Cabrera, how are you going to be feeling at that point?
I won't know until the first inning because, like I said, it'll be a coin flip. Just to go back on what you just said about going Eddie Cueto, if Eddie's being pulled from the game, it's because he's probably walked a couple of guys.
Yeah.
Bringing in a guy like Cueto, who's then probably going to give up a free
probably not the one, is it?
Run might not be the best way to do it.
Maybe you do it the other way. Could you go Cueto with like Eddie Cabrera as like, the 3rd inning guy, 4th inning guy?
It's going to be challenging, isn't it? Like for me, I think Skip has. If you look at all these 1-run wins, and yes, a lot of it's luck, and it's kind of balanced out from last year where it was a complete opposite. But ultimately, yeah, you're right. He has managed every game, not every game, but a lot of games like the playoffs. You look at the way he burnt through the bullpen at the beginning of the season.
Yeah,
like he was thinking about getting today's win, hang tomorrow. And they kept doing that. And then that's kind of why the sort of wobble in the middle of the season happened, or at least it was a part of it.
Yep.
So I think, to be honest, Skip has won a lot in his career, hasn't he? The playoffs is nothing new to this man.
No.
So, yeah, no, I've got every faith in him and his decision-making that even if those decisions don't work out, he's still at the time was making the best decision for the Marlins to try and win a game.
For sure. Talk to me about the offense then, mate. If the Marlins are going to win this, they're going to have to put up some runs. When we look at the pitching matchups, obviously Wheeler's going to be going, Nola's going to be going. Contract year Nola, by the way. So, like Aaron Nola, he's looking to secure his next deal. He didn't end up getting an extension with the Phillies done. A lot of pressure on Aaron Nola. Can he step up in this spot? You maybe assume like if needed, game 3, Ranger Suarez would go. Probably, maybe one, I don't know. But let's just focus on those guys. Offensively, if the Marlins are going to piece together some runs, what do you see being the source of those runs in this series? Who's going to be the stick to step up and deliver for the Marlins here?
Well, one of the things I wanted to do was not so much focus on recent numbers, but focus on numbers against the Phillies this year.
Okay, makes sense.
There's some very exciting numbers out there. Jorge Soler with 4 home runs in 10 games against the Phils.
Oh, my days.
Yeah, Josh Bell with a 1,111 OPS against the Phillies.
Wow, that this year? This season?
This season.
Okay.
The number that jumped out at me was De La Cruz, 3 home runs against the Phillies. Like, he's really struggled recently.
Yeah.
But against the Phillies, I mean, maybe that number's in the back of his head. So, or maybe someone should be telling him this. Like, that would be huge for him, wouldn't it? Because the second half has been weak. Ultimately, there are some absolute killers. I could talk to you about Lewis and Rice's batting average being over 340, but actually that's just him versus
That's Luis Arias.
the league. That's his number. Normally that number should jump out as something as a positive, but that's just him being him, isn't it?
It is. Who did he get his cycle off? Was that against Nola? I mean, I'm asking you that like you'd know it top of your head, but the cycle was against the Phils. I don't know why.
I do have the cycle baseball card behind me.
There we go. Well, see what it tells us. Was it against Aaron Nola?
Funnily enough, it doesn't tell me. Well, that's useless, isn't it?
Absolutely love that. But to your point, though, with Arias, like, his numbers are going to look fantastic against everyone. For me, you look at like Jorge Soler, like last time we saw him in the postseason, he was the World Series MVP. So Soler, he loves these big moments. He loves playing against the Phils. That's great to hear. Josh Bell equally. Feels like Josh Bell just in the NL East just comes alive. He always used to blast against the Marlins. It's great to see that he does the same against the Phils. De La Cruz, I think, is a great call, by the way. I was going to say who's like the sleeper guy, but in reality, De La Cruz is the sleeper guy. Everyone's going to be looking at what's Soler, Arias, Bell, Berger, and Jazz going to do? What are those five going to do? What you're actually saying to me is, could we get some serious production out of De La Cruz? Your sixth guy. Or Jesus Sanchez. That's another interesting part about them going 2 righties in their first 2 games. Means Jesus Sanchez is going to be starting both games. Jesus against lefties, it still looks a bit patchy for certain. It's always a little bit erratic with Jesus, but it would be so Jesus Sanchez to come alive in this series out of nowhere and just start hitting a couple of bombs. And everyone's like, oh my days, who's this guy? I mean, I don't know what his record is against these guys, but he'll be starting both games, game 1 and 2. He probably won't start game 3 if Suarez is going, but he's the type of guy too. But for me, I mean, the other kind of hidden treasure here really has just been John Birdie recently. Like Birdie has absolutely come alive. Since probably the All-Star break, like Birdie's been such an important player for the Marlins. And another guy I was thinking about, veteran, again, don't know how much he'll play in this series, but I do wonder, could someone like Yuli Gurriel just come and deliver a huge hit out of nowhere? A bit like what he did in New York recently. He's not going to be playing and starting both games. He probably will start in game 3. He could do anyway, but, Gurriel, he's been there before. He loves the postseason. He comes alive. Could be another really interesting guy. Like, the thing is, mate, I've mentioned 10 guys there probably, all of which, you can look at and go, there could be a huge moment here, to be honest with you. I don't know where it's going to come from, but, I feel confident. I actually feel confident about this series. Like, I love the matchup with the Phils because I look at the Phils and they're entertaining, but they're entertaining because they have a vulnerability about them where anything can happen. The old days, it was the Phillies bullpen was absolutely disgraceful and would just blow games. Feel like they have tightened that up a bit, but I must say in leverage, I probably prefer the Marlins bullpen over the Phils. What about you on the bullpen side?
Yeah, I mean, the Marlins have a strong, dependable bullpen. They've had their wobbles over the course of the season, but there's a lot of faith I have in the bullpen right now because of how they've carried this team throughout the season. For long periods of time, they were absolutely the asset of this team. Yeah. And going into the playoffs with 2.5 pitchers, starting pitchers essentially. You've got guys that if Luzardo and Garrett give you 5 or 6, then you take that, don't you? But in the playoffs, that's kind of like nowadays we see guys getting pulled in the 2nd or the 3rd or the 4th because they've walked a guy. Like that's how micromanaged games are. So you could argue that the relievers are actually going to have more innings pitched in the playoffs than the starting pitchers will.
Agreed.
So, yes, while having 2 fantastic starters would be great, and I think in a way the Marlins have that, as I said with the numbers, it is a bullpen that they're going to rely on. And if the starters can get through 4-5, keep it close, then the game's handed over to the relievers. That's where the games will be won and lost.
Absolutely. I spoke about in yesterday's pod that like the strength of this club is the bullpen. And in the postseason, it's the bullpen that delivers most of the innings, pretty much. And so sneakily, I think the Marlins, I know the Phillies are favorites, and they should be favorites because they're at home, but I feel like they match up well. I like the fact that we've got two lefties going. I think it's a lefty-heavy staff in general. I think that matches up nicely. The Marlins offense, I think we're going to get Luis Arias back. Skip Schumacher speaking today with the media, expecting things to be fine for Arias. He's been seen, taking grounders at second. That's, for me, a big step. So we're going to have Luis Arias. We're effectively, offensively, going to be at full strength, pretty much. And I think with that, the bullpen, the rotation as it is, the Marlins have a great opportunity here to go and create some noise in Philadelphia. The Phillies will be feeling themselves too. They've been here before. Very recently, they've had success, and so they'll be feeling it. I'm not surprised this is the premier matchup and is in the best, the Showtime slot. That's how you want to phrase it. I think this series is going to be potentially the best series of all 4 wildcard series. I expect it to go to 3 games too, to be honest with you. I expect it to go to 3. The way the Marlins seemingly operate is they like to lose the first game in 3-game series and then win the next 2 somehow. So wait to see. Sean Barrett, the UK GOAT. It's been a lot of fun. Appreciate you joining me again. On Monday, it's our first Monday talking about postseason baseball, and that has been very, very sweet. And thank you for everyone for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. This, of course, is your team every day, and tomorrow is another day. The Marlins start their postseason run in 2023, and we'll be here before the game talking about it, and then likely after the game, hopefully celebrating too. We'll see you then.